when people want to say that my homosexuality is a choice, I always look at them and say, "So it's a choice?" And they're like, "Yes, it's a choice." I say, "Okay, then be gay." Well, they can't do that, can they? You know?
Hey, what's up, guys? It's X Morgan with My Spiritual Life, and I'm so excited because today I have a really special guest, Mama Joe, who is going to share his story about leaving an evangelical Pentecostal church after coming out as gay and the difficulties of growing up in such a intense religion, with so much homophobia. Yeah, all of that, where I'm so excited, and I actually met Mama Joe through this channel, and I'm so grateful, for the friendship that we have accrued over the years, as well as your support on the channel, and I'm so honored to share your story today, so thank you for being here.
Thank you. So I'm
And
Mama Joe. I'm an ex-evangelical Pentecostal.
there you go. There it is. That's it. Oh man, I am so excited because your story is absolutely wild. But what's even crazier is just how loving and accepting and kind you are to people regardless of how tragic so many elements of your story have truly been. So, for those who don't know, could you give us a little explanation of what an evangelical Pentecostal like religion and worship kind of looks like?
Okay. The we were I think people from the outside refer to us as evangelical Pentecostals. We referred to ourselves as being a part of the charismatic movement, um,
Okay.
which is it kind of looks like if you've ever seen a United Pentecostal service. It's like that, but we like for our women to look good, so they can cut their hair, they can wear pants, they can wear makeup. We don't have all the uniform rules of the UPC, but other than
Oh,
that, the
thank
service looks
goodness.
almost exactly the same. A lot of
Got it. Got it.
a lot of speaking in tongues, waving, raising your hands, praising the Lord, praise and worship service, dancing in the aisles. Um, wildness,
Very wild, very wild.
Yes.
For those, who aren't familiar with it, is it's each congregation kind of run by like a different pastor, or how is that kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
set up?
there's no central organization that says, "We are the rule makers for this
Got it.
movement around the country." Each individual church is run by its individual board and has its own unique individual interpretation of things and rules about things.
Got it. Got it. Okay, cool. Thank you for explaining that. So, take me back to the beginning. If you have, maybe give
Okay,
us a little family background, kind of where you guys were living, if you want to mention siblings or anything like that.
okay,
And then some of your first like church memories, good or bad.
okay. Family-wise, I'm the youngest by a long shot. Like, my nearest sibling is almost 12 years older than me, and my older brother is 15 years older than me. Um, and my parents also had another child previous to them that died terribly. I mean, it was tragic. Uh, he He lived 9 months and 23 days, I believe, and was already, pulling himself up on furniture and standing, you know, and, he was at our grandmother's house, and he knocked a pan of boiling water over onto himself from the stove, and,
Wow.
it destroyed him so bad they couldn't take his clothes off
Oh
because his
man.
skin was seared to the clothes. He's buried in the clothes he suffered in.
Oh
Um,
wow.
so that that broke my mother.
Oh, I bet. That is
You
so
know,
tragic.
um, And she was extremely depressed, and my dad actually went behind her back to the baby doctor. I can't think of the word, but and talked to him about
Yeah.
it, and he said, "You need to get her pregnant.
Oh, wow.
Get her pregnant
Right, to
quickly.
try to
The hormones that go around are going to elevate her
Oh,
mood,
man.
um, and and that'll hopefully get her mind off of this." Um, so at any rate, that their life was pretty normal, you know. As far as church goes, they were members of the Christian church, which is a denomination, you know,
Right, right.
that not a lot of people know about, but it's kind of like a Baptist church. It's pretty, straightforward and a little boring, you know. But
Right, right.
in 1959, my mother found this church, and it was a Pentecostal type church. And what attracted her to it is she's an amazing singer. She had actually
Oh,
sang at the opera in New York. She
wow.
sang with shows there. She and my dad met in World War II. That's the reason my dad's a Yankee and my mom's from down here.
Right, right.
And so, at any rate, the music in a Pentecostal church is just amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever watched like a Gaither homecoming video, but the music is just outrageously good. The musicians are top notch,
Right.
and you're not in the choir just because you want to be in the choir. You got to audition, and you got
Oh,
to be
right,
good,
right. That's not how it is with Mormons. They just let everyone in, which is why the choir is usually not so good.
So, so that's what attracted her, is this wonderful music program. And like I say, she was an amazing singer. And what a lot of people don't know about her, she was also an amazing musician. She played drums,
Oh,
clarinet,
man.
violin, and piano a little bit. She wasn't great on piano, but she could play a little.
Wow.
Um, so she wanted to be a part of this great music program, and they wanted her. There was actually a deal put together that they would guarantee her a solo once a month, you know, with the choir.
Wow.
That's how
Wow, they
badly they wanted her. And
wow.
and it was a great healing place for her, I think, because it was after becoming a part of this religion that she decided she wanted another child.
I
because
see, I see.
because she always, the way she told it to me was, she never felt like she didn't grieve Michael
Yeah,
before the other two were born, and then she
got
was
it.
so busy raising them that
Yeah,
she didn't grieve Michael until just a few years before it was born. So
right,
after she was
right.
over that, she's like, neither one of these children replaced that baby in my heart. I want one more baby,
Oh,
you
right,
know
right.
and so that's when she started going to this church and decided she wanted another child. And
Wow.
to give you a little back information on this movement, have you ever heard of the Azusa Street revivals?
No.
And I think it was 1906. A revival started on Azusa Street in Los Angeles, and it went until 1915. It's like this 9-year long constant revival of people being filled with the Spirit, and speaking in tongues and all like this.
Wow.
And from that movement, several organizations got their start.
Yeah,
The Assemblies of God came out of the Azusa Street movement. The Foursquare Church came out of that movement. That's Amy Semple McPherson's church, and so the pastor of our church, the founder of our church, was very well connected with these people from the beginning. Like, we had, Oral. He was friends with Oral Roberts, Kenneth
Wow.
Copeland, all these big name
Wow.
people. Were in my church. I've met them. I've seen them preach live.
Wow. Wow.
And I really don't think that anybody had any kind of ill will in their heart of wanting to start something that hurts people.
Of course.
I don't think anybody had that in mind, because I honestly don't remember. I don't remember the gay thing being harped on so much until later in life.
Right. Right.
But then, and it might just been that I didn't know what sex was when I was younger.
Right. Right. Maybe that
But
wasn't brought up when you were
yeah,
4. Yeah.
yeah.
But
But
yeah.
so it's a very well-connected church. Our pastor actually started the Full Gospel Businessmen's Convention.
Right.
Um, he started a magazine that morphed into becoming a Bible college in Dallas, Texas. He was a very brilliant, very kind, loving man, and he really liked to promote others. He wasn't all about himself.
Right. Right.
He wanted to bring other people in to share their message at our church rather than be the
Right. The
the
head
overseer,
honcho.
the head
Yeah.
honcho. Yeah,
Yeah.
he
Got
was
it.
more about promoting others. And that, I think that's one of the reasons he's so incredibly loved and respected, and always was,
I
because
see. I
he
see.
was all about promoting others. So at any rate, mom joined this church, decided she wanted another child, and and there were always guest speakers at our church especially back in those days. But before the founder passed away, there were a lot of people coming in to speak there. And one of them was a man named William Branham. And there's actually a church named after him. They're called the Branhamites. And they actually only listen to his sermons. They don't have, like, they only listen to his recorded sermons from before he died back in the 60s.
Really? So, like, they
Yeah.
won't listen to any new preachers?
Yeah. Yeah, because they see Branham as being just literally right under Christ. He's a
Like
prophet
a
of God.
prophet?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, and they actually call him a prophet or just
Oh
view
yeah,
him that way?
yeah. And and
Whoa!
and people came from far and wide because he had this healing ministry. He could pray for you and you
Oh,
were better. You know.
damn.
Now, of course, I wasn't around back then, so I can't testify to that. But
Right,
I
but
just
people
know that
believed in
people
it.
say, yeah,
Yeah.
people believe that. And he was at the church one time in, I want to say, 61 or 62. It was quite a while before I was born.
Right.
And in the middle of his sermon, he turned around and pointed at my mother and said, "The Lord is giving you the desire of your heart." And in that moment, she had this spasm in her stomach that felt like a baby kick, you know?
Whoa.
And so
S
she
y
knew she's going to have this baby. And of course, it didn't
Right.
happen until 64. January of 64 is when I was born. And I was that baby that didn't want to come. Like, I was supposed to be a Christmas baby. And when that didn't happen, they were hoping I would be a baby New Year. And when that didn't happen, they didn't know what to think. I was born on the 13th of January. I'm like 3 weeks late, And my
Happy
mother,
late Christmas.
yeah, and my mother always referred to my birthday as the day you tried to kill me.
That's, like, really cute. Oh my gosh.
Um, so at any rate, I'm born, and of course, mom goes to church. She's a part of the music ministry, so she's there on Tuesday night for choir practice, Wednesday night for midweek service, and 2 services on Sunday.
Sure.
My dad did not go to church. Um, he was a Christian, but he did not like church. Yeah, period.
As many good Christians, right?
Right. And so at any rate, I go to church with mom, and of course I'm in the nursery, and I want to go back that far because I have memories of being in the nursery.
Yeah,
And one of the memories I have of being there is that's where I learned that I was not one of the boys. They were
I see.
different from me.
I see.
I was also not one of the girls, but I identified a little bit more with them. They
Right,
were my
right,
friends, but the boys, I just wasn't one of them.
right,
So
right,
when people want to say I've made a choice to be gay, that really hacks me off
right. Why is that?
because I didn't have a choice. I knew I was different at the age of 2.5. I knew I
Right,
wasn't a
right,
boy, like the other boys anyway,
right.
you know. And there was a lovely old lady that took care of us in the nursery. We called her Granny. And when it
Oh,
was and you get out of nursery, of course, when you no longer need diapers.
right.
That's when you graduate to children's church is when you no longer need diapers. Well,
Sure.
I stayed with Granny. I didn't want to go to children's church. I wanted to stay
Oh
with
my
Granny.
gosh.
And
Yes.
my best friend who is a girl was also in the nursery, and she's a year behind me, so I wanted to stay with her.
Of
And she's my
course.
best friend to this day.
Oh.
I mean, I literally do not remember meeting this woman. She's like
Yeah.
that. She's family,
Yeah. That's
plain
really
and
special.
simple. And so I wanted to stay with her, and I wanted to stay with Granny. Um, then they forced me to go to children's church, and of course, in the nursery, you're not learning Bible stuff.
Right. You're just playing
You're
with
just a baby.
toys.
You're playing with
Yeah.
toys and stuff. But now you're in children's church, and I had questions that the children's church leaders just didn't know how to handle,
Even
you
so
know?
young.
Yeah, because I mean, we're 3 verses deep into Genesis, and I'm like, you know?
Question.
And I remember one of my first questions was, when God said, "Let there be light," who was he talking to?
Oh, that's funny.
And they're like, "Well, he wasn't
Right.
talking to anybody." And I said, "Well, then why did he talk?"
Oh my gosh.
You know?
That is so interesting. Like I like it's one of those things where like I wouldn't even think about it, but a child recognizing that like who's he talking to? Why would he
Yeah.
say that otherwise? That's so interesting that you noticed that so young.
And so we're going through, and I remember getting all the way to Noah's Ark in
Right.
the lessons, and that I was just like, this is this, and I'm 4. I'm 4 years old, and I'm sitting there going, okay, this did not happen, you know.
Wow, it was too much a fairy tale even
Uh,
for you as a
yeah, I mean,
4-year-old.
because I was a smart kid. My parents bought all the World Book encyclopedias and everything for my older brother and sister, and I was a kid that looked through that, and I loved animals. Animals are my thing. I love animals. And I remember I had learned about the platypus, the duck-billed platypus from
Right.
Australia, and when they started talking about this boat in the Middle East with 2 of every animal, and I remember thinking, well, how did everybody get there?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, how did, I can see how camels got there,
They just walked a long time, but yeah, how did
but
the platypus get
did
over
the
there?
platypus start swimming 3 years before this flood to get to the Middle East,
Oh my god, that's hilarious.
and it just, they never could answer my questions other than to, and I hate to borrow a phrase from you, but it's almost they wanted me to put it on a shelf.
Oh,
You know?
yes, yes. They're like,
You
"That's not the
know?
important thing, just don't think about
Yeah,
that.
yeah, don't worry about the little
Don't think about who
details.
God was talking to, think about,
Right,
what he was doing and what he was saying." Yeah, yeah.
right.
Don't think about the platypus, yeah.
So,
Oh, wait, I'm just out of curiosity, did you believe in Santa Claus as a kid?
I did and I didn't, and then my parents had to admit it was a lie
I see, I see. I was just curious
because
because you're such a thinker.
because my thing, I remember this was also when I was 4 or 5 years old. It really bothered me that somebody was breaking into my house while I was asleep, and it
Like, this feels like a
the
violation.
the magic of the toys being there was cool, but this old man is breaking into my house.
That is so funny. I've never to this day heard a 5-year-old, complain that Santa was breaking and entering, but I feel like we should be more concerned about that.
Yeah,
If he can leave stuff, he can take stuff too.
yeah, and so I remember that year was the year without a Santa Claus, you know,
My
and, uh,
goodness, that's
and then the
funny.
next year, I decided that I didn't get as much that year, so the next year I told my parents I was gonna believe again.
You were like, "Actually, I don't mind if he breaks in, it's
Yeah,
fine with
now
me."
that I know it's you, let's just keep up the ruse.
That is so funny.
But,
Okay, yeah.
but at any rate, it was around this time I'm asking all these questions in children's church, and the leader of children's church, her name was Sister Lura. I don't remember her last name, but I mean, she snatched me up by my shoulder. I'm going down the hall like this and up these stairs and to the edge of the platform in church, and she just pointed at my mother and did like that.
Oh, you were
And
in
I and I,
trouble.
and I'm standing there thinking I'm about to be beaten in front of all these people.
Oh, no.
Because my mother did not shy from the belt.
Right,
She
right.
so
Wow.
but at any rate, when mother came down, Sister Laura just said, "He has adult questions and he needs to be in adult
Oh.
church." So
Oh, that is so strange.
yeah. And
I mean,
so
like, I guess she was right that you did really have pretty adult questions.
yeah, I think so. But
Wow.
but at any rate, at 4, most kids aren't around the wildness of the Pentecostal type
Oh,
service
because you're in the nursery and
because you're
then
in the
you're in
nursery
the
or children's church.
okay,
And
okay,
they even have songs in children's church where you do all these movements. And I remember one of them had something to do about turn around, touch the ground, and praise the Lord. So it's like these songs were teaching you this is what it's going to be like when you go to big church. So you need to
Right.
get used to it.
Raise the roof. Oh, that's
so
funny.
so at any rate, I'm suddenly in big church, and of course my mom's in the choir. So I don't sit with her.
Wow.
But there was a lady, Sister Marie, that we knew, and mom said, "Go sit with Sister Marie." And then they talked about it later, and Sister Marie would explain things to me because she knew I had questions. So I could look at her in the middle of a service and just have this look on my face like, "What the hell?" And she'd be like, "What that means is la 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 la,"
Right, right.
But
Right.
I'm in church where people, will just suddenly shout, or shout gibberish,
Right.
or and there was this one dude that he would start hollering in tongues, and it might go on 5 or 6 minutes.
Yeah, and for anyone who might not know what the whole speaking in tongues thing is, it literally is, like you're yelling gibberish,
Yeah,
and, sometimes they're even, like, in a trance-like state when they do it, and they view this well, you can explain. They view that as, like, the Holy Spirit touching them, right?
yeah. You can't control it because the Holy Spirit is so dynamic. that you can't control this speech coming from you. It's and some even think it's the Lord speaking through you in another language. And
Oh, man,
if you
that's
read those
wild.
verses in the Bible from when that happened,
Mhm.
they really were speaking other languages. They weren't just speaking gibberish.
Wow. So,
Or
yeah,
or
that
that's
is
how
really
when
interesting.
I read it, that's how I see it. Guys in Israel
Yes.
were speaking Greek fluently and not knowing what they were saying,
And they would have no one to prove
whatever language.
otherwise,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
yeah, they would, "Yep, that was me speaking Greek. What did I
Yep.
say? I don't know, but, you know, I said it."
So here I am in big church with all this wildness around me, and Pentecostal churches, it's all about scaring you
Yeah.
into being one of us, you know,
Very
so that
profound way of putting it.
yeah, because it's the fear of hell, and that and as what gets you down to that altar, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
and and I felt safe with Sister Marie. And I remember when I'd see these things happening around me, I'd be like, "Ooh, I hope you don't ever touch me like that,"
No,
Love you,
thanks,
Lord, but I
Jesus.
don't want to be
I'm good.
crazy.
I imagine that would be weird, yeah, because like, you know that that's not normal when you don't see that at school or anywhere else, and so,
Yeah.
like, yeah, I imagine it could be like, oh, that's kinda weird and creepy." Yeah, especially as such a young kid that's not used to seeing that.
Yeah. And of course, every service with us ends in an altar call, which is probably something different for most of your listeners. Um, because it's the preacher always dictates that everybody needs to bow their head and close their eyes and just meditate in the Lord. And
Gotcha.
if you need to make a change in your life, you need to come on down here to the altar,
I
you
see, I
know,
see.
and then they lead you through a prayer of salvation
Right.
where you basically admit that you're useless without God and that you need him in your life so that you can be a good and prosperous person.
Gotcha.
um so every service ends that way, and there's always just dozens of people down at the altar just crying and
Right.
wailing and being prayed for, and of course, and we lay hands on people when we pray for them.
Yeah, yeah. Just like on a shoulder or back or something
Yeah,
like that,
yeah,
or yeah.
yeah. And sometimes I remember there was this thing. Sometimes people are slain in the spirit. They're up there, and just so into it that they just pass out on the
Oh my
floor. You
gosh.
know,
It's so interesting, like, psychologically
yeah,
to see all of that, and to consider, like, what's really going on, you know?
yeah.
Anyway, continue what you were saying.
so so at any rate, I'm experiencing this at an age where other kids were not.
Sure,
My
sure.
contemporaries were not having the same experience I was.
Right.
And I remember the first time they did communion in the church with me there. I mean, I stood up on the pew and I said, "That's gross." I mean,
Oh, that is so funny.
I was like, I mean, my head is just going to, we're like zombie people. We eat people, and we eat people
Right,
and drink blood. How oh my gosh,
right, because, for those who don't know, the whole idea of communion is that it's different in Mormonism, where it was, like, symbolically representing the body and blood of Christ, whereas, I guess with evangelicals and Catholics, I think it's more like there's this idea that it, like, literally is the body and blood of Christ. Is that
Well, Catholics do believe that it literally DNA turns from bread to flesh and turns from wine to blood. It was more symbolic with us, but it's still, just the description getting up to, they're just like, oh yeah, you know,
Right,
this
right.
is
You're like,
happening, you know. It just
right.
felt like you're in a horror movie, you know.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, this is the day you find out your parents are vampires, you know.
Oh my god, that's so
But
funny.
I remember that, and for some reason the wafer didn't really bother me, or maybe I didn't hear the flesh part, but I ate the little wafer. But then when he said, "And this is my blood, take it and drink it," I was like, "Blood? Gross!" You know?
Oh my god.
And without skipping a beat, the pastor of the church just said, "That's right, Joe. The blood of Jesus spilled for your sins." You
Oh my
know?
gosh.
And I sat right down, you know?
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. I mean, I
But I
feel like that's the appropriate response to have if you're the
yeah.
first time you find out you're blanket drinking the blood of Christ.
Yeah. And I've never been comfortable with the the sacrament. I've
Yeah.
always been like, if they're passing it down the aisle, I'm just always like, okay, here you go, you
Right, right.
know.
Like, I'm
And
good. I
if they do it in a way where you have to go up front, I'm like, yeah, yeah, no, no, not me,
You're
you
just like, "It's
know.
okay, I had eggs for breakfast. I'd
Yeah,
rather not
yeah.
have the flesh of Jesus
I don't think
today."
blood's going to set well on my stomach, you know.
Oh my gosh, that is so funny.
But so at the same time, I'm going to school. I go to private school. Um, I
It's
go
like
to
a
a Bap.
Catholic school or
It was a Southern Baptist school,
gotcha, gotcha,
and that is what my mom's family was historically Baptist.
gotcha.
Her generation was Southern Baptist. The previous generation was Missionary Baptist. There's some subtle differences between the two, but not enough to really get into. One's the Missionary Baptist is closed as far as communion.
Gotcha.
If you're not a baptized member of that church, you don't get to participate. Whereas
In the blood of
in the
Jesus.
yeah, and the Southern Baptist is a little more open. If you're a Christian, you can take communion with us.
Sure, sure.
Um, so I'm going to a Baptist school too. So I'm literally at church all the time,
Yeah, yeah,
because my mom and the music minister are best friends. They work on music together all the time,
yeah.
so we're either at the church or her house with them working on stuff together. Or and then, like I say, Tuesday was choir practice, Wednesday night service. Thursday, I think we had off, but we might be at church working on music. Um, but at school, we have 30 minutes of chapel every single day.
Right.
So every day you go to church, you know, and as a different kid, I'm singled out. As soon as I start associating with people outside my family, I'm singled out, because I'm the sensitive sissy kid that you can pick
I
on and feel
see,
like a
I see.
man.
Right, right.
So my schooling experiences weren't great, and of course, here I am going to a Christian school,
Right.
being treated terribly by supposedly Christian children.
I
So nothing
see.
adds up well. Because there's a lot of bad
Right, right.
associated in Christendom to me, anyway.
Right, right, that would make sense that you start internalizing it as, like, maybe these people aren't really as accepting as they claim to be or whatnot.
Right.
Right? Because I don't feel accepted here.
Yeah. Well, when I was in the third grade, um, Dad built us a new home, and it was like 27 miles away from the church.
Oh, okay.
And so I stopped going, and I told my mom I wasn't going to go. And I mean,
Yeah.
she was about to get out the belt and teach me that I was going to go. And my dad, thankfully stood up for me and he said, Mama, if he's big enough to tell you no, he's big enough to stay home with me,
Oh, that's
you know?
cool. That's good.
So from the third grade to the ninth grade, I didn't go to church, but I still went to Christian school.
Gotcha.
And let's see. And as I got older, the being singled out became more and more prevalent. Especially when you suddenly figure out what the hoo-ha's for, and you realize you don't think of it the same way as everybody else.
Right, right.
um, and I mean, I was singled out pretty terribly at the school I went to.
And when you
I
say
mean,
singled out, do you mean like bullied or
picked on, bullied. I mean, bullied
gotcha.
to a point that I attempted suicide twice my ninth grade year.
Wow. That is
Um,
so rough.
one time with pills, and of course I didn't know what I was doing, so I slept about 16 hours and was done.
Oh,
Thankfully.
man.
And then another time, and I have the scar to prove it. I cut into the vein here.
Wow.
And I literally had just made the cut when the neighbor that lived behind us banged on the door.
Wow.
And to back up, my sister came home with my sister got married, had a child, and she comes home and she becomes incredibly ill.
Wow.
She has Crohn's disease, and she
Oh,
got it in
man.
76 before they even knew much about it.
Right, right.
And so for 4 years, I'm watching my sister die at home, and I'm being treated in such a way that I want to die at school.
Right, right.
And mom decides in Louisiana at that time, you could get your driver license at 15.
Yeah.
And so at 15, they decided they were going to buy me a brand new Mustang. You know,
Whoa.
hooray, you know.
Wow.
But you got to go to church.
Oh,
You're
boy.
going
And you
back
were
to church if
already
you're going to
being
have a
tortured
car.
with school church.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And so I go back to church
Yeah,
and,
who wouldn't do that for a Mustang,
well,
though?
yeah, exactly.
Oh, no.
So I go back to church and everybody's very friendly to me there. And I remember
Right.
one girl made a very fatal error in something that she said to me because my
Oh,
mother had quit going to church about 3 years before that.
I see.
She had a falling out with somebody there. It was after the founder passed away, and she just stopped going.
Sure, sure.
But when she decided that if I'm going to have a car, I have to go to church, that means we're going to church together in my car. And one of the
Gotcha.
girls that made friends with me told me that she said, well, mom said we need to make sure you're happy, so we keep Marcel in the choir.
Oh, whoopsie.
And I was like, oh, and I, and I always kind of liked her. She was a friendly enough girl, but after that, I didn't trust her at all. I was like,
Right, you're
okay,
like, "Okay, you
I
don't."
can't believe your nicety at all, just based
That's
on
so
what you said.
sad. Yeah, because all of a sudden the friendship feels so disingenuous, like, you just
Yeah,
want my
yeah,
mom's singing voice, you don't really care about me, which would probably feel heartbreaking after, like, you are already so isolated and picked on at school.
yeah. And also in my ninth grade year, we had a band director at that school. It was the first year, it was her first year to teach. Our old band director had retired, and we had this new band director, fresh graduate from education school.
Right.
She's like 22. So cool. We loved her so much. We called her mommy. I mean, that's how
Oh.
much we loved her. And she was fired for being a lesbian.
Oh, really?
And that's when I came out the first time
Oh,
because
wow.
I told I was very upset about it, and I remember telling the principal at school that if she was not good enough to teach there, then I wasn't good enough for my parents to spend $400 a month for me to go there.
Wow.
So that caused a call to my parents, to my mom.
Right, right.
And so mom took me to an exorcist.
Oh my goodness. Okay, wait. Tell me about what year this is. If you're
This would have been 1978, 79. It was before I got my car.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
when that happened. And so the way she got me to go was, I want to go see so and so, and you can drive. Because
Oh
I had
my
my learner's
gosh.
permit, so I got to drive all the way across town to go to this exorcist house. And
And
then,
her
and we,
plan was to get the gay devil out of you. Was
yeah,
that
yeah.
Oh
So,
my
so we go
gosh.
in and visit a while, and then mom stands up and says, "I'm going to run to the mall real quick," and just leaves for like
What?
half an hour.
Oh boy.
And this woman's, praying for me and just calling out what she thinks are demons anyway. And
Right, right.
and I learned in that moment uh, that I had to be somebody else
Yeah,
if I was going to survive my upbringing. I simply had to become somebody else,
that is so sad.
and that's what I did. Um, and boy, that's a little hard to talk about. Sorry.
Take your
Um,
time. Don't apologize. This is really heavy, because you can look back and see that self-betrayal, but also know that like you had to for your own survival, and that is so, so
yeah,
sad that you were
yeah,
in a situation where you had to like intentionally destroy yourself
yeah.
and pretend to be someone you're not.
So I basically dissociated out of that house, and a new person sat in that spot. Um,
Wow, that's crazy.
um, and there apparently has to be some kind of a outward appearance of demons coming out of you.
Right, you
Like
gotta throw up or
you
something.
vomit or
Yeah.
spit or whatever, cry a lot, and I couldn't work up any tears or anything, so I just started coughing. Just
Right.
just making myself cough.
Right,
And she's
right,
taking that as a sign of the demons coming out of me. So when
right,
mom comes
right.
back, I'm obviously I've been through an ordeal. My face is red, my eyes are red, I've been crying. I can barely talk because I've been coughing for 15 minutes straight, you know. And so we go home and start going back to church. And I don't know what made me do it, but one week um, there was I never can think of what that's called, but like an awning where you can pull through for people to get out when it's raining. Uh,
Oh, yeah, like a pavilion
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I pulled up under there to let mom out because it was raining. And I said, I'm going to go to the church down the road today. I'll be back at noon to pick you up for lunch. And so I
Okay.
just went to this other church. And in that service, I remember him like pretending to argue with the Lord in his
Oh.
prayer because he kept saying, I don't know why you're telling me this. I know my flock.
Oh my
There's no
gosh.
reason for me to teach this. I know my flock. They know this.
He's like, is he, like, whispering to himself, like, into the microphone,
Yeah,
basically?
yeah. Well
Oh.
he's praying, and then every now and then he'll just kind of stop and be like, but
Oh
Lord,
my
that
gosh.
can't be, And then he finally says, the Lord says there's one. So he taught a lesson on salvation and being filled with the Spirit. And I'm sitting there buying it hook, line, and sinker.
You're
you
like,
know?
"He is
He's
sensing
talking
me,"
about me,
whatever.
you
Right.
know?
Right, right. You're like,
And,
"Okay.
and so when it's time for the altar call, I'm like, well, it's now or never, So I go
Yeah.
down, and a friend of my mom's actually went to that church, and I was sitting with her and her husband, so they came down with me, and to pray, to lay hands on me and pray, and and they spoon feed the words to you with this salvation prayer. The
Yeah.
the the pastor is going to say 3 or 4 of the words, and you're going to repeat them. Then he's going to say 4 or 5 more words, and you're going to repeat them. So
Right."
there's no way you can get it wrong, right? you know but
Oh, boy.
nothing is happening. I say the words, and I'm praying. My heart is open, and just nothing seems to be happening. The spirit's not happening anyway. I'm not speaking in tongues,
Right,
and
right,
that's the outward appearance of having been filled with the Spirit.
right, right.
And of course, in our circles, if you're not filled with the Spirit, you're just barely going to heaven.
Oh. Oh my gosh. That
And
is oh
at
my
one
gosh.
point, though, in all of this hullabaloo with people, praying in tongues all around me, and but that he even said, you can borrow a word here and there from the people around you just to get you going, and your language
Oh,
will come.
okay, okay. I
So I
see.
did that. I borrowed Shonda Mackay from this one and Helion de Rossi from this one, and
You're like, "Alright,
I'm like,
alright."
okay, maybe that's what I have to do to get out of here now. So at any rate, I go back and pick mom up. Well, she knows there's been a difference in me. Now I don't know if she knows that because this was before cell phones. This is like
Right.
1979. Um, but I pick her up, and she looks, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, you've been filled," and
Wow.
I'm like, and I just was like, "Yeah," you know.
Right, right.
But I know from the previous experience at the Exorcist house that I've got to keep this up.
Right, right. On some level, you're
On
like,
some level, I've got to keep this
yeah,
up. And I did really believe in that moment. I
right,
really believed, but when I look back on it as an adult, this was a brand new church. There were 50 people total in the room, and I'm a
right.
big guy. If you're used to the same 50 people all the time, you're going to see me when I walk in the room,
Right, right. Because 'cause you're so tall and yeah, yeah. So, it would have
and
been easy for him to like,
yeah,
single you out in that
yeah,
sense.
yeah. Which
Right.
is, and I would really like to believe that he didn't intentionally do that, but subconsciously, I think
I
that's what
see.
happened. You
I
know,
I
because
see that.
I do refuse. I refuse to believe that anybody that I went to church with that was a leader. I just I can't believe that they were intentionally deceptive.
Right, right.
So I believe he believed he was talking to God.
Yeah.
You know,
I see what you're saying, as
yeah,
opposed to the alternative, which is that he was pretending to talk to God in order to get you to react in a certain way.
yeah,
I love how much grace you give these people in this situation, like, how much compassion you give to the people in these stories, because it is so easy to look back and be like, "He saw me walk in, like, he's just full of shit," but ultimately, we don't know what he was thinking, and it's
yeah,
very possible that he believed his own narrative, and I think so often so much damage comes from people who sincerely believe bad ideas,
yeah,
and it's hard not to be angry at them for that, but at the like you say, it's like, that in it's not about them being a bad person or whatever, it's more like they've got some bad ideas they're working with.
yeah.
Anyway,
and
continue.
and so I become very involved with the youth group. We had a great youth organization. The guy that was our youth pastor was like a Pied Piper of kids.
Oh,
We all adored him, and our youth group was one of the biggest youth groups in this city, and this is a city of a couple of 100,000 people. Um, and there were people who changed from their church to come to our church just so their kids could be in our youth group. That's
wow.
how good this guy was. And he actually he went on from our church to start another organization, which a lot of kids coming out of that organization are calling it a cult. um,
Oh,
that's
I
their
see.
experience. I was never a part of that, you know
Right, right.
but I do not believe them.
I
you
see, I
know
see.
um, I can I've listened to a lot of their podcasts, and I'm like, yeah, that's definitely cult behavior. you know
Sure, sure.
um, so at any rate, I for a few years there, I'm just headlong into it. I mean, I'm reading my Bible every day. My Bible's on the seat of my car, you know, and
Right,
before I go into school, I just open it and read a verse, and close it up
right.
and go to school for the day. Um, I also was a very smart kid. I graduated a junior. I was never a senior in high school. Um,
Nice.
so I graduated a year early, and my mother was not going to allow me to go like to LSU or MSU, or she wasn't going to let me go to some great big state university party school somewhere.
Right, right.
And I went to my dad and I was like, part of the reason I worked so hard to get out of school early was to get away from that.
You're like,
Because
"I
my
need
mom,
some autonomy, like, I need to get out of here."
well, and my mom was incredibly controlling. I have
Yeah.
found a lot of Bill Gothard's works among her books. So if you're not familiar with that, that's the culty organization that the Duggars are a part of.
Oh, gotcha.
And so my mom always taught me that disobeying her was disobeying God,
Right, right.
period.
Damn.
It's the same thing. So I don't hate my mother. I just wanted to get away from that control.
That's
And
a
so my dad
lot.
stood up for me and he said, Mama, he can go to any Bible college in the country and we'll pay for it.
Wow.
So I chose one in Florida. you know?
Far away.
Yes. And of course, there we have an hour of chapel every day. And we are
Oh, I see.
required as Bible school students to be a part of a church and a part of the ministry of that church. Whether
Gotcha.
you're teaching Sunday school or working in the nursery or a part of the music, you had to be involved. So in that situation, once again, I'm going to church 7 days a week, and and then the following year I stayed home and went to college. Went off to a college about 70 miles away from here. And there, I was kind of had one foot in, one foot out.
Yes,
Because if I
yeah.
was home, I would go to church with mom, but if I was at school, I was having nothing to do with it.
Right, right.
And then when I got out of college, I'm going back to my church again. And our church, I skipped over something. I need to back up.
Yeah, of course.
Um, when at the end of my sophomore year, and our church was so big, it probably sat about 800 people, 600 to 800 people,
Yeah.
and we had to have two services on Sunday morning because there was just too many people that wanted to come to that church. Um, and it split. And this church is our lives. That when I tell you how much I love these people, they're family to me.
Wow.
They are my people. This is Sadie Mae Jenkins that's
Sadie.
going by.
She wants to be part of the party.
Yeah, but So it split, and it split under horrible circumstances that really don't need to be rehashed.
I
But there was an
see.
us versus them
Oh,
mentality between the
wow.
two, between how the church split. And
Wow.
so all of us went through, as teenagers, went through this kind of horrible, not kind of, really horrible spiritual trauma
Right.
together,
Because this is like your
because,
family and it's being ripped apart.
yeah.
Wow.
And, I don't think any of us had ever thought about not being a part of that church,
Oh, I see.
and now half of us aren't, you
Right,
know.
right.
There's another church now. So when I come back from college, I start going to the other church,
I see.
and that's the church that the man who took over our church after the founder died. He went off and started his own church, a different church, and so I'm
Got
going
it.
to that church after college, and every time I'm at church, from that day I was quote unquote saved at the church down the road until this final attempt after college, if there's an altar call, I'm down there.
Oh,
I'm down there on
wow.
my knees, crying, begging, and pleading for God to make me normal. Take
Right.
this same sex attraction away from me,
Wow.
and I'm just begging, and I was one of those. I read my Bible every day. I prayed every day. I could not have been
Right.
more open to a higher power making a change in me.
Right,
And it never
right.
happened. And at that last time I was down at that altar, I cried, I prayed, and then I just went, this is bullshit.
Oh, wow.
And I stood up and I looked at the cross and I just turned my back on it and I walked out. And
Wow.
that's the day I found salvation,
Oh.
was when I walked away from church because I was free. It didn't
Yes.
affect me anymore. You know,
Wow.
it just,
Wow.
and so from there I moved out west. Um, and as I usually say, I just kind of wandered away. It's not like I quit and everybody knew I quit. I moved away, you
Yeah.
know.
Right,
And
right.
so at any rate, I just wandered away, and I wandered away to the only gay founded city on the planet. I moved to West Hollywood, California.
Woo!
Yeah. And just was free little gay boy in in this gay city, and
Wow.
and I did try other churches there because I found out that there's churches that don't teach this homo thing,
Right,
you
right.
know. And I remember it growing up in the church I grew up in. I heard it all the time, and when I say that to my friends, they don't remember it that way. And I always say that's because it didn't apply to you.
Oh, right, right.
Why would you remember that it was literally every other service when it didn't apply to you?
Right,
You
right. It
know,
makes sense that it wouldn't stick in their memory, whereas for
right?
you, it would because every time you hear it, it's like such a hurtful and scary thought, and yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
And so I went to I don't know if you're familiar with the MCC, the Metropolitan Community Church. That's actually a gay founded religion. Um,
Oh, okay.
Reverend Troy Perry created this religion, and if I remember right, he has a Pentecostal background as well. When I went there, a lady named Nancy Wilson was the pastor there, and I just adored her.
Oh, good.
Um, But it's not like we ever studied those verses, because
Sure. Sure,
there are
sure.
6 verses in the Bible that very clearly state, you know,
Right, right,
that I can't be saved. And and that's where my faith really started crumbling, because
right.
even though I wandered away, I still, thought I was a good Christian. I was just
Right.
sitting for now.
Oh, funny. You were
But
like, I'll figure it out later or
yeah,
something." Like,
yeah.
so it
And
wasn't
well, and eventually you think,
yeah.
well, maybe I'm supposed to live this sinful life, and some miracle will happen later in life, and I'll be able to share this grand testimony. You know?
Yes. Okay, you know what's funny is I think it's actually normal to think that because I've heard a lot of people leaving Mormonism say the same thing like, "Oh, maybe it's like I'm supposed to leave so that I can understand why everyone left so that I can then bring everyone back." Like, and I remember
Yeah,
thinking that and I've heard it more. So, I just find that interesting like psychologically. I think it's like a step in the process is like you can't really
yeah,
like, you can't really convince yourself it's not maybe it's just not true, right? You have to just be like, "Well, I'm just gonna fix it later somehow," even though it doesn't make sense. So, as you left, you didn't feel like you necessarily, like, accepted the fact that you were gay in the sense that you didn't feel bad about it, but you were like, "I'm finally just gonna let myself kinda be free."
yeah.
Okay, I see, I see.
And not let the Bible dictate my moves.
Yeah, yeah.
And after I was at the MCC, I went to the Methodist church a while. And they're kind of split down the middle. Some Methodist churches are accepting and some are not.
Right, right.
And the one I went to in Hollywood was very accepting. The gay pride flag stood next to the Christian flag on the platform, you know.
Right. That is right, right,
and
okay.
and I remember that just filled me with pride,
That
you
must have
know.
felt so good compared to the church you grew up in.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I loved the people there.
Right, right.
But one of the things, like I say, it's not that we ever gave other explanations for these verses. We just didn't talk about them.
Just ignore them,
Yeah.
and that must have
And
been kinda concerning.
well, yeah, because I was taught that, I mean, the Bible literally, it's literal, is the way I was taught.
Wow.
It's
Yeah.
literal.
Right,
The world
right.
is 6,000 years old. There were no
Right.
dinosaurs. Um,
The platypuses swam
yes,
for
they knew.
years to get to
Yes.
the ark. Just kidding.
and but having been taught from a literal point of view all of my life as a child, skipping over verses is something that you just shouldn't do, because if it's
I
the literal word of
see.
God, you can't just
You
skip
can't just
over a
skip over
verse,
it. Okay,
you
right,
know.
right.
And that's when I decided that those verses are lies.
Okay, okay.
And so for a long time,
Kinda compartmentalized the
yeah,
Bible.
yeah, exactly. But if one verse is a lie, and this was years, but if one verse is a lie, that calls into question every other verse.
Every single verse, right.
And I'm talking about 6 verses. Granted, that's not even 1% of the Bible, but still.
It it is one of those things where you can either trust all of it
Mhm.
or there's kind of this cognitive dissonance of like, if I can't trust all of it, how do I know which parts of it I can trust and which parts I can't?
Right.
And especially with such a big issue such as, like, homosexuality, because you think about how one pastor is like, "No, this is what the Bible says, it's definitely wrong," and then you've got that other church you went to with the gay flag and the
Yeah.
Methodist flag, and you're like, "Okay, this is so incredibly different, like, one of these
Yeah.
people has to be wrong," right?
Exactly. And so by and then, like I say, when people want to say that my homosexuality is a choice, I always look at them and say, so it's a choice, and they're like, yes, it's a choice. I say, okay, then be gay. Well, they can't do that, can they? You know?
Oh my gosh. Wow. Just
I
be
mean, if it's a
gay.
choice, you ought to be able to just turn a switch on and I don't,
And
you know.
and be good to oh my
Yeah,
gosh, it's funny because, yeah, I think a lot of people, they don't put themselves in a situation that makes it real enough for them to understand how much
yeah,
that doesn't make sense. So I wonder, uh, if, someone hearing that, it would kind of jog something in their mind of like, "Oh, well, wait a second, maybe this isn't as easy as I thought."
yeah.
Wow, that is so interesting.
And so, at any rate, I go to both of these churches and it just starts crumbling because if these verses are not true,
Right.
then, was he really born of a virgin? I mean, that seems like an obvious lie, doesn't it? You know?
Oh my god, that is so funny.
And like I say, the flood. I always just was like, That's just as a child, I was like, there's no way that
Right,
boat would have
right.
been so full of shit. You know.
Oh my
I mean, that
gosh.
just the smell alone would have killed Noah and his family. You know.
Oh my gosh.
But when you start opening your mind and start looking at because I started looking at other things,
Right,
because I'm
right.
think at that moment I'm still thinking in spiritual terms. So I start looking at other spiritual things. I look at Zoroastrianism and Buddhism and uh, other completely different things that have no basis in the Bible or Jesus.
Sure, sure.
And you start finding out that a lot of the stories in the Bible are thousands of years older than the Bible, told by other people using different names.
Right,
You
right.
know, so who really saved all the animals in the world? Was it Noah or Gilgamesh?
I see, I see.
Who was really born of a virgin? Was it Jesus or Zoroaster? You know,
Right, right.
so you start seeing that it's just a retelling, and it seems like a lot of religions, both current religions and dead religions, have so many of the same stories.
Right, right.
So it's just a retelling.
Right.
And if it's just a retelling, then yeah, there's liable to be lots of errors in it. And if there's errors in it, I don't need to believe it.
Right, right.
Because I grew up a literalist.
Yeah,
It,
it
it, it's
makes
it's all
sense
it's
that
all or nothing. You know,
it makes sense that that jump would be hard. It would be hard to close that gap to ever
hmm
even consider being spiritual or religious again when you went from like, the Bible is literal and to if it's not literal, then it's not like, how am I supposed to
yeah,
be religious at this point? Yeah.
right. And if it's just legend, why aren't we praying to Norse gods? You know,
Yeah, yeah.
and and people want to talk. People always want to tell me that I've done something wrong because see, that is the hook in evangelical Christianity.
Sure,
If
sure.
it doesn't work, guess what? That's all your fault.
Yeah.
It's all your fault that it didn't work. I mean, what a great out. You know?
Seriously,
Oh, well, obviously you did
seriously.
it wrong. Come give us some more money next week and we'll try again.
Oh my gosh, right, right,
And
and people fall for that, they really
oh
do, and
yeah.
no matter what the religion is, they will believe it because I think because we're so filled with shame that we don't know how to deal with,
Yeah.
it's so easy for us to just turn in on ourselves and be like, "I'm the problem."
Yeah.
And we're quicker to do that than we are to say a certain establishment is the problem. And
Yeah.
I think in part that's because we want an establishment to follow because we like having rules to know that we're doing a good job. And so it
Yeah.
all just kind of comes crashing down at one point though.
And one circular, or it goes circular in my head anyway. One of the things I was always taught about heaven is that it's going to be this basically just a forever praise and worship service.
Right.
You know, just
Right,
just
which
praising
sounds
God
really,
for
really
eternity.
fun for like
Yeah.
800 years, and
And
then it gets boring after that.
yeah. And one of the things I was taught about why God created the earth and man, because it's very patriarchal, it's never humans, he created man. You know? Oh, but so one of the things I was taught about the reasoning behind creating earth and man was that God was bored with angels that didn't have choices but to praise him.
Oh, wow. I've never
You
heard
know,
that
it
before.
was
Yeah.
the purpose of earth was to give beings a choice because that's the praise he craves, is somebody choosing
Oh
to
my
praise him.
gosh. This turns God into like a really unhealthy
Yeah.
like, when kids seek for like a praise from their parents. Oh, that is such a weird perspective.
And so he creates the world to do this, only to have us turn around and come back to heaven and be the same old boring angels.
Oh, right, right. Why
Yeah,
would that make
I mean,
sense?
that just doesn't make any sense to me. That
Sure, sure.
particular explanation doesn't make sense to me. And I'm not saying everybody that grew up in my kind of church believes that. That was just one of the things I was taught along the way. Um,
Right, right.
but and also, like you say, that's going to get boring after a while. You know,
Yeah, it can't be
and
fun forever to sing praises to Jesus.
and
Eventually,
having
it's gotta
been a part of the music ministry in church, there's a formula
Right.
musically to make the spirit move,
Oh, that is interesting.
because we're going to do a bunch of, you know fast-paced praise the Lord songs that get people up on their feet and moving around, and then we're just going to yank the rug out from under them and just drop into a kind of a silent period with just, the tinkling of little bells in the background, maybe.
Right, right.
And all of a sudden, when that's done to you, if they do that to you at a Madonna concert, you see Jesus. you know because it's this high low thing that just rips out from
Right,
under you.
right. Like you
And
said, it's a formula. Yeah,
yeah,
and they've
yeah,
nailed that formula.
yeah. And uh and and I don't know if you've ever watched it. I would have to get out my phone and Google it for you, but there's a guy on YouTube that has figured out how to make you have a Jesus experience. And it
Oh,
and it
cool.
all has to do with things he says and movements he does, and maybe some tapping on the table or something like that. And
Yeah.
he'll talk to somebody, and it has nothing to do with necessarily God. It might be philosophical in his
Oh, yeah.
talk. And then he leaves them with one word, one thought, and he taps the table and walks out. And you see their face just go from normal to, and they have
Yeah.
this experience, and it's scientific.
Yes. Yes.
If you know how to do it, you can make people have this experience.
I've
You
seen
know,
a video, either the one you're talking about or one similar to it, where they specifically did this experiment where they had a guy come in pretending to be a priest and
hmm
pretending to read from this scroll and like saying that this person was cursed or something. And he did this whole like exorcism thing and asked them if they felt better afterward, and most of them said they did, and then they explained that, it was a hoax, and I might be remembering it a little bit off, but it was something like that. Like you were saying, and it was incredible how much of an experience they had because they simply believed that they were going to have an experience.
yeah,
And when you realize that, it makes you question like, okay, how do we know when there's a sincere spiritual experience versus like an expected one? Because this guy pretended to be a priest and someone had, God touch them. So what does that mean? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm with you.
But like I said, even though I knew about this formula, I didn't think of it as being
Right.
evil in any way. And
Right.
like I always say that I'm still so in love with my people.
Yeah.
Culturally, I am a evangelical Pentecostal. I might not be one as a believer, but they are my people, and I love them.
Yeah.
Especially the ones that I grew up with.
Right. Right. That's
And
beautiful.
one thing that has happened since social media and reconnecting with people that you haven't seen in 15, 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
um, every June, it seems to always happen during Gay Pride Month, because that's, of course, a month that I celebrate.
Right.
And
Right.
uh, and every year during June, one of my lifelong friends shows me their true colors in how they react to something that I've posted.
Oh,
And
okay.
so every year in June, I have to block and eliminate somebody from my life because I'm simply not putting up with that.
I see. I see.
I love you. I love these people like they're brothers and sisters to me.
Yeah.
But I know what your belief system is. I dedicated 24 years of my life
Right.
to
Right.
that belief system. I know. So you telling me is just you being nasty.
I see. I see.
You are purposefully, now you're just trying to hurt me.
I see. Because you're like,
And
it's not like they don't think that you already have been taught that. It's like
right.
you feel like they're trying to cut you down.
Yeah. And I do feel like that. I feel like it's
Yeah.
adult bullying at this point.
I see. I see.
But every year, it seems like every year somebody will say something that just cuts me to my core. And as much as it hurts, I still love them. I can't help it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I and if anybody I've cut off was to see this, know that cutting you off was the most loving thing I could do,
Right.
because of the
Right.
way you're talking to me.
Right. What
The
else am
only
I
thing I can
supposed to
do is put
do?
you out of my
Yeah.
life.
Right.
If I see you at a funeral or at a shopping center, I'm still gonna say hi, I'm gonna try to get a hug, you
Yeah.
know, because you're imprinted on me.
Yeah.
Um, but but as far as what you believe, I know what you believe, so
Yeah.
shut up,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
I
know?
understand.
Your beliefs mean less than nothing to me at this point in my life.
I see.
I respect your right to stay in and still believe it works for you. It's not written against you. It was written against me, you know?
Right. Right. Right.
So, it's not like I hate anybody for being in. And like I say, I love it. I still love a good praise and worship service, you know? If the Gaither Homecoming is playing anywhere close to me, I'm gonna go to that concert because those are my songs and my people, and I love them,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And, if you need a tenor for your Christmas program, I'll come do that. I love to sing, and I love church music. I will happily help out with anything like that, but I'm not gonna come and listen to the sermon, you know?
Right.
It
Right.
just doesn't affect me anymore.
I see.
And just in case anybody I know is watching, it is not your job to save me.
Yeah.
It's your job to love me or leave me, but it is not your job to pursue me and save me.
Yeah.
I'm done,
Yeah.
you know? And at this point, sharing your belief system with me is just you being ugly
I see. I
because
see.
I know what you believe. And it seems like so many of them just can't do that. And I think that's just a part of the indoctrination
It
of,
is,
they
yeah.
they have to save you,
They have to, yeah.
you know?
Their soul is at stake, right? If they
Yeah, I
aren't
guess.
it yeah, yeah. It's hard
But
because, religion, it will take some of these things that some of these unhealthy, right, of, like, trying to push your beliefs on other people, turn
yeah,
those traits that are really unhealthy, really toxic into something noble, right?
yeah,
Like, it's healthy to push your beliefs on someone if your beliefs are correct, right? It's easy
yeah,
for people to think that but it's not true. It's not healthy, but in their mind, like, the best thing they can do is, in some cases, be belligerent towards someone who's living a
yeah,
different kind of lifestyle because that's what the Lord would have them do. It's incredibly ironic. Like, I know where they're coming from, and I find it incredibly sad, but I get it, but
yeah,
it's unfortunate because, obviously, you're someone who has a lot of love for people and a lot of forgiveness in your heart, and it's unfortunate that some friends that could have really enjoyed that aspect of you more throughout your lives together, threw that away, when they
yeah.
decided to, try to stop you from being gay.
Yeah, yeah, because gosh, that's the most terrible thing in the world. You know?
Right, right.
And and some of them, they believe a murderer who gets saved is more valuable than me.
Isn't that crazy to think
Yeah,
about?
and I'm
That's
like, I've never, it's not like I ever tried to fuck you, you know?
Oh, man.
But,
I can only imagine how hurtful that would feel to feel like your sexuality puts you beneath a murderer. That's
yeah,
pretty rough.
yeah.
That's pretty serious. Like, those implications are incredibly, incredibly, high.
But see, that is how intense they see the work of salvation
Right, right.
because, our parents, when I look back, sometimes our parents were so stupid, because you could get out of prison because you molested a child and go down to the altar, give your life to Jesus, and now
Right.
we have to trust you,
Oh, man.
you know?
That's scary. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't it? You
It
know?
is. It is.
And, and it I remember being in situations where, there would be somebody along, like, at my friend's house or whatever, and I'd be like, "Why are y'all letting him stay here?" "Oh, well, he got saved on Sunday, and he doesn't have a place to go." And I'm like,
Oh my
"Oh my
gosh.
gosh." It just when at the time, I thought, what good Christian people they were, and now as an adult looking back, I'm like, "I wouldn't allow that man in my house with my kids." You
Yeah,
know?
that's scary. That is scary. Like,
Yeah,
that's dangerous, And, yeah, yeah, you don't know, for those and evangelical else out there who don't know this, you can pretend to speak in tongues.
yeah, you sure can.
So, yeah, that is I think it's hard because one of the best aspects of religion in general is that community, right? And that trust
Yeah,
and that family-like community, but it is scary to realize that can pull a wool over your eyes as far as, like, trusting people that maybe you shouldn't be, you know?
right.
So, yeah, like, maybe trust your church members, but also not to the extent of, putting your family in harm's way, right?
Right.
Would be the common sense, but wow, that is really crazy.
And they, but like I say, that's how seriously they take this conversion
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah,
Because
clearly.
because after you say these words, you are no longer the person you were when you walked up to the altar.
Yeah.
You are now a
Wow.
whole new person in Christ.
Right, right.
And it's almost like they have to prove they believe it too by inviting these
Oh, that makes sense. Like
you
they're
know
obligated, otherwise they're
yeah,
not really believers. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, that's rough. That is
yeah.
rough.
I remember my friend there was like a crazy person stayed at their house for a while and like
Right.
stalked her for a while as an adult, and
Wow.
it's all because they believe this conversion
Yeah.
is a real thing. And I'm not saying that people don't have a real experience, you know.
Right, right.
One of the things I did to avoid church when I started having to go back is I learned you can help out in children's church and you don't have to deal with the heavy shit
Oh,
in
you
the
just get to play with the kids. Yeah.
yeah. And I remember working in children's church and watching this little boy get saved in
Wow.
children's church, and I remember seeing a difference in this little boy, and I remember thinking, well, he got something I didn't get,
Wow.
you know,
Right.
and I don't know what that is, I don't know what that difference is, but and I'm still friends with him. He cut
Oh,
a
wow.
Christian album about 10 years ago, and I sent like $300 or something I sent him some money to help him get this produced, because I love
Wow.
him. He's a brother to me. I love him.
Oh,
And
wow.
of course I don't know how a lot of these people are going to feel about, because it's not like I ever had a real coming out here at home,
I see. I
because
see.
I lived out west and lived my out west. And now I've recently returned to my hometown, and I think a lot of things have come full circle. That's when I discovered you,
Oh.
was after I
Yeah,
moved
yeah.
back here, and I even tried to go to a Methodist church here, and I think the only difference is that it's church in my hometown,
Mm,
so that just makes it icky,
makes sense. There's plenty of trauma surrounding that. Yep, yep.
So that's the only reason I can give for having been comfortable in a Methodist church in Hollywood, California, and not being comfortable in a Methodist church here.
That
Is that
makes
it's
sense.
just it's home, and church at home is icky, you know?
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. So tell me, like, as far as in your journey with your sexuality and everything, like, how did you get to a point where you were just like, maybe there's nothing wrong with the way that I am, you know?
Um, wow. Well, when I first moved away, because I moved to California, then I moved to Missouri. I actually spent a few years in Springfield, Missouri. I went to
Oh,
MSU
cool.
working on finishing up my bachelor's degree. And I didn't really deal with it well as far as coming out with myself. I drank a lot.
Right, right.
I would say I easily drank half a fifth of scotch every day of my life for 16 or 17 years.
Oh, wow.
And I did mountains of cocaine so that so that I could get over my hangover and go to work, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
One of my friends,
Right.
when I mentioned that to one of my friends in a group,
Yeah, yeah.
setting, a group therapy session, um, and he was like, "My God, how did you drink that much and go to church?" I said, "2 lines of cocaine and it's time for Sunday school, baby," you know?
Right,
But that was one of
right.
the things I learned out west is you can, do it. It's not like I was a coke head. I just did a little in the morning to muscle through the
Right,
hangover and
right.
get the job done so I could drink more tonight, you know?
Well, and it makes sense when you came from just such a traumatic background that that would be just it would be
Yeah,
really easy to wanna escape that all the time.
and coming full circle back to here,
Yeah.
um, led to some discoveries about myself.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
when I said earlier that I had to become that I had to become a different person,
Right, right.
um, that is something that happened.
Yeah,
Another personality took over for a few
yeah.
and since the I didn't even mention trauma in the neighborhood. I was molested when I was 4 years old by a
Wow.
neighbor, and I think that's when the cracks first started to appear. But when I had
Yeah,
this experience with an exorcist, that's when I had to just become good Christian boy.
yeah, yeah,
And it when I came back home and started, you know, the first thing I noticed was I started cutting again because I was a
yeah.
cutter as a kid, and people don't seem to understand that, but it's like you hurt
Yeah,
so much and you can't point at anything and say that's why I hurt. But if you
yeah.
can take a blade and make yourself bleed right here on your thigh, you can point at that
Wow.
and say that's why I hurt. You
Wow.
know? And that's the first thing I noticed that came back was I did some cutting and I was like, "Oh, I've got to start talking to somebody about that."
Right, right. Good
And
for you.
then through talking, I find out that or I had actually been diagnosed in college because we had free counseling at college.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I remember that counselor talking to me about multiple personality disorder.
yeah. Right,
And
right.
that was right after I'd seen like Sybil and the Three Faces of Eve. And I was just like, I am not that fucking crazy. And I never went back, you know?
That makes sense, right? Because there was such a stereotype that was scary. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But the counselor I went to here, she started talking about it, and she said the first thing she started talking about was dissociation,
yeah,
and explaining that to me and how that works, and talking about DID,
yeah,
um, and how that's what used to be called multiple personality disorder.
yeah.
And but she taught me um, how it really works because the movies are all lies,
Yeah,
for the most
right,
part.
right, they're all so dramatized and yeah.
Yeah, because,
Like, you have this one personality that's a murderer or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
right,
or
right.
whatever, well, I had one personality that was a holy roller Christian, you know?
Right, right. Right, right.
But, one of the things she taught me, though, is that when you have a system, because systems are very complicated,
Yeah.
um, because there could be hundreds of reasons why you've split at different points in your life,
Right, right.
and if you don't have your first split by the age of like 7 to 9, your trauma may still produce a dissociative disorder, but it won't be dissociative identity disorder.
I
It,
see,
it
I
would be
see.
different because it seems like DID starts very young.
Got it.
But once the cracks start, you can crack later, you know.
I see, and, like, it once those fractures are already there, it's easier to
Yeah.
split off, and it sounds like it's very self-protective, right? It's your
Yes.
body yeah,
Yes.
trying to protect the real you by kind of having
Yeah.
these different shields, something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And one of the things she taught me was she said, your system has three directives, or is that the word she used? But at any rate, the purpose of a system is threefold, basically. It's number one purpose is it's to protect the host.
I see, I see.
Number 2 purpose is to hide the past
Oh,
because it's that personality that went through that, not
right.
you,
Oh,
know?
wow.
And the third
Right.
thing is it is to remain unseen.
I see.
It's supposed to be a secret. So if the one that was religious was called Jay, and if you
Yeah.
called Jay Joe, Jay would answer because he's not supposed to tell you that he's not Joe. He's protecting Joe.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And
Right.
and
Right.
so once she explained that to me, and also she explained co-consciousness, because
Sure,
you can
sure.
be co-conscious with another personality, or you can have a personality that just takes over and you lose some time, you know.
Right, right.
But it just when she explained it all to me, I was like,
Yeah.
of course I had to have different personalities to go through all this.
How else could you have survived, right?
Exactly.
Like, it's all so intense. I mean, from so young. I mean, even just your birth was traumatic, like, with your mother having the traumatic passing of one of your older brothers,
Yeah.
and that's crazy. Yeah.
And of course I was her favorite.
Right, right,
Mom was abusive,
right.
and my dad was just a heart of gold.
Yeah,
So my brother and sister naturally gravitated to my dad.
right.
And when I was born, she told my dad, "This one's mine, hands off."
Oh, that is so unhealthy.
And so I didn't get to know my dad as a human being until I was in my 30s.
Wow.
And I found out what a great guy he is or was,
Yeah, yeah.
and how different things might have been if he had been a part of my life as a child,
That is
you
so
know.
rough. That must have been hard, like, processing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And mom manipulated things to make me love her more,
Yeah. Oh,
because
yep.
if the answer was yes, it's because mom said yes. If the answer is no, it's because daddy said no.
I see, I
You
see.
know?
Right, right. It's easy to throw dad under the bus to make herself look better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So
But
tell
yeah,
me.
it seems like I've come full circle to back to my hometown and got some good counseling, some good therapy, did some EMDR therapy as well that,
That's
was
amazing.
just so, unifying, I guess would be a good term to use
That's
with
so
a dissociative
beautiful.
disorder.
I think that's such a beautiful way of putting it, like
Yeah,
you're stitching all these pieces together and becoming whole kinda
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
I think that's so beautiful.
and, I still, I think dissociation is something I'll always do. I've dissociated a couple of times through this interview. I
Sure,
don't every
sure.
now and then when I'm like, "I've lost my thought," that's because I dropped into this conversation.
Welcome back, right,
Yeah,
right?
it's like, "Okay, I'm on TV now." You know?
Oh,
But it when sh the way she explained it just made it healing.
that's so beautiful.
It wasn't a scary thing anymore. It was like, "Look at how strong I am. Look at how incredible I am. Look at all I went through to survive this life. I created all these
Right.
people just to survive this life."
And yeah, and, like, how, like, ultimately self-loving it was that you were really
Yeah,
just trying to protect you,
yeah,
and that's what we're all trying to do, like, that's what all of us are trying to do is to try to help ourselves in the best ways that we know how.
yeah,
Absolutely. I love what a place of peace you've come to, and I mean, I'm sure it's, maybe, maybe it seems different that, the way you talk about it here versus in therapy or whatever, but I mean, from the way you talk about it, I feel like I'm really impressed with how much love and grace you are giving yourself in dealing with all of this and in coming to terms with it and being patient with yourself. I think that's so beautiful and very, very inspiring.
Thank you. And there's things that will always be a part of me.
Yeah.
Like like in my family we have the prayer that you say before you eat.
Yeah.
It's the same every time. Lord, make us
Yep.
grateful for these and other blessings. In Christ's name, amen.
Yes.
That's the prayer you say before you eat. Until the day I die, when I sit down at a table, that's going to run through my head.
Yeah.
It's
Right,
ingrained in
right.
me. Um, if somebody asks me to bless the meal, that's what I'm going to say,
Yep, yeah.
um, but I have been I try to defer to other people. I don't mind. I will bow my head politely while you bless the meal.
Yeah,
I don't have a problem with that. If you ask me to bless the meal out loud, I'm probably not going to call on God to do that.
I see, I
I'm going to
see.
say something more like, well, may this meal be good and good for us, and may we enjoy each other's company.
Absolutely.
You know,
So
and and
tell
and when I talk about things that are ingrained like that, I have no problem with people praying for me.
Right,
I
right.
think if you're a believer and you're not praying for me, that's probably a sin on your part, you know?
I love that.
Because if I know there's something wrong with you, I'm going to, well, like, when you sent me the text yesterday about, you know,
Yeah.
it's a maybe or maybe not tomorrow because of this.
Right,
When
right.
I was meditating last night, I put good energy out there towards you, and just
I
hoping that you're
love
going to
it, I
feel good
love
enough
it.
to do this today. And
Thank
and and I
you.
think that's really all prayer is
Yeah,
trying to harness some energy and direct it,
yeah.
is really all it is.
I love
And
that the compassion you have for people who pray, because there's a lot of, people who consider themselves atheists who will be like, "Don't pray for me, that's ridiculous," whatever, and
yeah,
they get offended, and it's like, why would you be offended that this person, like,
yeah,
is trying to love you, you know?
yeah,
Like,
exactly,
that's their way
exactly.
of trying to help you, maybe it does nothing, right? Worst case, it does nothing, and this
Yeah.
person is spending a minute just thinking about you, and that
And how
shouldn't be
gracious is
offensive.
that of them,
Yeah,
to
like, you
take
should be
a
glad
moment
that
out of
they
it.
care, right?
Yeah,
Right, as
exactly.
long as
So
they're
I
yeah.
encourage you, if you're a prayer, you better be praying for me. You know, if you're not, you don't love me, you
Oh,
know.
I love it, I love it.
And like I say, I do what I think of as prayer for you,
Right.
and that's
Thank you.
just the just putting the energy out there of I hope things are good with Morgan tomorrow, you
Thank
know.
you. Thank you. Well, clearly it helped, so thank you.
Well, good.
But if it didn't help, I feel very loved, so thank you very much. I've always felt very loved and supported by you. I can say that publicly because it's my channel, I can say what I want, and you have been one of my biggest cheerleaders through all these years of running this channel, and it has always meant so much to me because I've had my high moments and I've had my low moments, and you've always
Yeah.
been there to tell me what a good
Good
job I'm
job.
doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that meant so much to me, and it still does, but especially, because my, self-esteem was incredibly fragile when I started.
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh,
it was
yeah.
hard. And and it still is hard, but your love and support, everyone can thank you in the comments because your love and support helped me keep going with this channel. So and I'm totally 100% sincere when I say that, and I'm so grateful for you. So thank you.
You're so welcome, and thank you because, I discovered your channel quite by accident, but I think that those of us who are going through faith crises
Yeah.
kinda naturally gravitate to each other.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like I didn't have to look up ex-Morgan to find you. I just had to start questioning my faith, and I
Yeah.
find all these other people. And I think what really made me love you so much was in those beginning videos that you
Yeah.
were putting out like 3 years ago. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes I'd see you had a new video, I'd turn it on, and be like, "Oh my God, she woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning with this on her mind," you know, and just had to get it off her chest, you
I
know.
did, I
And
did.
and and I was just like, "Oh, what a brave little girl," you know,
Wow.
to want to share this with everybody. Because you were sharing it as you're going through it,
I was.
and that was very encouraging to me.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Oh, I love it, I love it. Oh my gosh,
and
I
and
love it,
and just,
thank you.
because I have friends in every kind of religion, and I just want anybody to know who's seeing this, you already know how much I respect you and your beliefs.
Yeah,
You know,
right,
my
right.
boss is one religion, my coworker's a different religion. You know,
Yeah,
my brother's full in to evangelical Pentecostalism, or
right, right.
charismatic, whatever you want to call it. But I have nothing but respect for anybody's belief.
Yeah,
You know,
clearly.
you know, I mean, there's nothing kind, when after one of the hurricanes here, I'm driving down to the Gulf Coast
Yeah.
to deliver, socks and tools and stuff like that to people, and I'm passing along the way all the people from your church that are down there to help.
The helping hands Mormons,
Yes,
yep,
yes,
yes.
and
Yeah,
so I have nothing but respect for the good that a lot of religions do.
yeah, yeah.
I mean that's just awesome that people would be so faithful that they're like, I will spend my vacation cleaning up a mess in Lake Charles, Louisiana.
That's
I
incredible.
mean, how
It
loving is
is.
that to your fellow man? you know
It is pretty incredible, you're right.
yeah,
I love that you can appreciate the good things that religion has to
yeah,
offer, even though religion clearly hurt you so deeply and devastatingly. And I love, yeah, I love your perspective on it, and I feel like the further I get away from Mormonism, the more my love and appreciation for it comes back. And I feel
yeah,
like that's a sign of growth.
yeah,
And it's not to say that, everything they're doing is right or whatever, but it's to say that I
yeah.
can love those people and I can love that place because it will always be a part of me and because there are good things that they are teaching there as well.
Do
And
you think I'm talking to you, baby?
that was so cute, little
She's
meow.
over here just talking in my ear.
Oh, she's got your back, little Sadie
Yeah.
Mae. I've got 2 more questions for you, and
Okay.
I'll let you go. My first question is, how would you define your beliefs now? Like, would you if a label made sense, or maybe you don't associate with a label necessarily?
If I was going to label myself now, I would say perhaps I'm a hopeful agnostic.
I
I
like it.
kind of I kind of like the idea that there might be a super intelligence that's going to solve all this,
Wouldn't that be nice?
But I don't have a lot of faith that there is.
I actually feel very similarly. I'm like, I define myself right now as agnostic leaning toward atheist.
Yeah.
But I'm not one of those people that's like, "Well, I hope God's not real." I'm like, I mean, I hope he is. I also hope he's a good God, but
Yeah.
I just don't know that it makes sense
I
to me, at
I
least right
hope he
now.
this
Yeah.
is gonna sound terrible. I just hope if there is a God, I hope he's not the dick I was taught he was.
Right,
You
right. You're
know?
like, if he's the God that, my evangelical Pentecostal church taught me about, I think I'd rather just not
Yeah,
exist.
I'd rather that one just not be there, you know?
I
But,
think a lot of people would agree with you.
I went through a phase. I spoke about energy earlier, and some people, when I say this to people, they're like, "Oh, you're a Buddhist," and I'm like, "Well, no, I've never studied that.
Sure,
I don't
sure.
know." But I really don't have a problem thinking that everything emits energy. We're full of electricity,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
chemicals and all. So I have no problem believing that we all have an energy about us and that every living thing has an energy about us. And perhaps the reason the world continues is because there's a few more of us good ones out there than there are the bad.
Sure, sure.
Because I've always been very sensitive, and this was something that my mother got on me about. I remember when I was younger, but I've always been very sensitive to what people in paranormal groups would call residual energy.
Sure, sure.
Like I can walk into a house and immediately know something terrible has happened in that location.
I see, I see.
And I've walked it when I was little. I called it my house feeling, and we'd go in a place, and
Oh,
I would tell my mom, I would say, it feels like the ceiling's on my head. Like this, like I'm
right.
almost need to crouch to be in here.
That is so
And that's how I
interesting.
would describe it as a child. And she kind of thought that was something I shouldn't be talking about or exploring.
I see, I
You
see.
know,
Right, right.
but I've always had this sensitivity to energy anyway. So that's why I try for my energy to be good and positive and send it out however it goes. It
I
either
love
does
it.
something or it doesn't, but at least I'm putting goodness out there.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right, my last question is, what advice would you give to anyone that was in your situation, like, as a teenager?
You need to survive. That's what Mama Joe wants from you, is for you to survive.
Yeah,
And you got to do what you got to do to survive.
yeah.
And but that's what you need to do. And just so everybody knows why I'm Mama Joe, I when I first came out and was living out west, or even up in Missouri, I would always see these, like, they called them May December relationships, where like a 50-year-old man might be with a 21-year-old boy,
Oh, man.
you know, and I always thought, that boy doesn't want to be with him. He's not sexually attracted to him. He needs
Right.
a daddy,
Yeah,
because so
yeah,
many of us are thrown from our homes,
yeah,
and we don't have family anymore, and that's what that child is needing. So I've
yeah.
always had this rule: if you were not alive the day I lost my virginity, you're off limits.
Right, right.
There's just a cutoff point there. But
For
I
sure.
was living down south, and I worked at the bar. I was at the bar quite a lot, and it was a college town. So here I am in my mid 30s, and there's 18 and 19-year-olds in the bar.
Right, right.
And one of the kids started calling me Mama Joe, and I don't even remember how that started, but I liked it because
Right.
that establishes two things. One, Mama is taking the penis completely out of this picture,
Right, right.
and parental. If you're a kid coming out and you need somebody to just approve of you, Mama Joe approves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's who I try to be to young people, is the parental energy that they're seeking out. And I want that
That's
disarmed
beautiful.
from the beginning with this nickname,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, because who's going to want to, get busy with Mama Joe? They might feel differently about Joe the man, but Mama Joe, they're not going to want to get busy with that.
I actually think that's incredibly wise, especially as in that college town you have these young men who are closeted gay who may want an older man because, like you said, they have some parent issues going on. So I love that you were like, this is a healthy boundary here. Like, I'm
Yeah.
here to be
Yeah.
here for you, like lovingly, like a good mama should. I love
Yeah.
it.
Exactly. Doesn't mean I want to do it, that I don't want to do a shot out of your navel if that's offered. I
I
just say that because there was this cute boy that was on the he was on the cheerleading team at the college, and that was one of the things the bartender would do every now and then. And I thought, "No, okay, yeah, I can do that."
Oh man.
But
Well, we're all human.
yeah, and one thing I've noted now that I'm older, one of the things I see is that youth is always beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, there's people that I thought were beautiful when I was in high school that just grew up to be average to ugly Americans, So youth is always beautiful. I think that's a part of nature,
Yeah.
is for youth to be beautiful so that we get together and procreate. I think
Right.
that's a
Right.
that's
Biological.
a biological thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Makes
And
sense.
and you know, and one of the theories I've always wondered about, is are people coming out more and more as gay now because it's more accepted, or are they coming out, or are more and more people born gay because the world is overpopulated and that's just a natural thing that evolution does?
Oh, that is really interesting.
Does evolution suddenly kick in and go, okay,
Like,
these hundreds of millions of people are not going to breed? you know
that is really interesting
I
question.
can't help
I
but wonder
wondered
that,
too. Well, and I wondered too, like how many people like clearly, you're a perfect example of someone that like it really wasn't a choice, right? You grew up in a
yeah,
church that was condemning it so hard, and I think for some people they're right in that middle ground. They could go either way, but that maybe they're more likely to, be in a gay relationship because it's so widely accepted. And it does make me wonder, like, wait, are there why what's really going on here? Like,
yeah,
were there this many closeted gays before, or what? Like, I don't know, it is
yeah.
very interesting. Yeah.
And my parents slowly came around. Never had a session with them, you know. Um, but I remember my mom saying one time that God made him and I raised him, so he has to be all right, you know.
Oh, wow.
And and my dad actually asked my sister one time about me, and she confirmed that yes, I was. And he
Oh,
said, "I guess
wow.
there's always been people like that, but they used to get married anyway because that's what you did."
Yeah,
Back in his day.
yes. Right, right.
And I've never had a coming out talk with my brother, but I know he knows because I know
Yeah,
he asked my sister, you know.
right, right.
And I still think there's nothing better than standing next to my brother singing spiritual praise and worship songs, listening to him harmonize tenor with me taking lead. I love that. That those are
Oh,
precious times with that man. Or sometimes I'll
that's
harmonize tenor
beautiful.
and he'll take the lead. And we're not on stage, we're
Oh,
just in the congregation singing, but
yeah, yeah,
I thoroughly enjoy that, you know.
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mama Joe, for being here. Thank you for loving me with your big, big heart.
Oh.
And I was so honored to host your story, and I am in awe of hearing it all the way through. Like, I've heard bits and pieces of it over the years, I'm in awe of hearing it all the way through, and I'm really, really impressed with you that you are as loving and as wonderful as you are, despite all of these things that could have caused you to be different than that. And I think that says to me that, like, you just have an incredible heart, and that even all of these horrible experiences couldn't break you of that.
Thank you so much. And you, like I said earlier, you've been such a help to me in my faith crisis here since coming home, because it never really was a crisis until returning,
That makes sense, right?
you
Where
know?
it's all real again. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I forgot to mention this earlier in the interview, but one
Please
of
go
the
ahead.
first things I did when I came back here is I went to my church,
Oh.
and I went there to forgive it.
What?
And I just looked at the building, because nobody I know, there might be one or two people I know that still go to
Right.
that church, but
Right.
the building and the grounds carry a lot of carried a lot of negativity for me. And I
Yeah.
just, before I went in for the service, I just looked at the building, and I just kind of, I looked like a holy roller. I was holding my hands out like that towards the building, but I just said, I know as a pile of lumber, mortar, and bricks, you didn't have anything to do with my pain, but you
Wow.
do house it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for that, I forgive you. And then I
Wow.
went into the service, you know.
Wow, that's crazy. That's like that I mean, that is literally the definition of confronting your demons, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow. Wow, that's so, so powerful. I find that very, very inspiring and uplifting, and especially because like I've been working through trying to forgive people in my life for issues from my past, and I realize how freaking hard it is.
yeah.
Because forgiving is so hard, but like I know it's that
And
cliche
yet
of like
it's,
you forgive for you, right? You forgive for you. You don't forgive for
yeah,
them, you forgive for you, but it's still hard, but I'm seeing like how much beauty and power there is in it as far as like
yeah,
taking control back in my life. So I find that very inspiring for me personally. That
absolutely.
helps me right
And
now.
and 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 forgiving is also necessary,
Yeah.
because your hatred doesn't hurt the hated.
Yeah.
It only
Yeah.
hurts you. You're the one experiencing it,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
forgiveness is very necessary for you to have a healthy life, a mentally healthy life.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I hope everyone gives you a big comments in the hugs below. Uh,
Uh,
gives you a
I
big
will
hug in the comments below.
I will probably, just so you know, you're gonna have to forward good comments to me, because I will probably never read any of them here,
Hey, that's perfect. I got you.
just for the fear of a believer attacking me, and I don't want to experience
Oh,
that.
that is perfectly fine.
So,
I will
if
pass on
if there's
all the
something I
love.
need to know, you just send it on to me.
I absolutely will. I absolutely will. You deserve all the love that will come from this video. And luckily we have very, very good people that watch and comment. And I mean,
Yeah.
you're one of them. So
Yeah.
so so there's other lots of other great people too. Anyway, thank you for everyone who watched this video. And I feel like I'm at a loss of words. This was very, very
Oh,
beautiful.
thank you so much.
All right. Well, you guys who are watching this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give Mama Joe a big hug down below. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.
Bye.